Luis Barajas was thrown into finance at the age of 13 when he had to help his dad fill out a tax return. That same 13-year-old never imagined that he would be the number one financial Latino expert in the United States. Recently named Top 100 Financial Advisor by Investopedia, Luis's journey to the top wasn't easy. The road was filled with cultural challenges, late-night hours, and bringing honesty to the finance world. Luis left a prestigious firm in Newport Beach to return to East L.A. He wanted to give the people in the barrio financial dignity. He saw how financial institutions treated his parents, and he didn't want that type of practice to continue. His mission was to treat the people of East L.A. how he would want anyone to treat his parents, with respect and dignity. Luis struggled. It challenged him to change the mindset of the barrio, so much so that he quit a total of 5 times. He had had enough. But his mission and purpose in bringing financial dignity and financial education to the barrio superseded his frustration. He cleverly used financial therapy and cultural jokes to help his clients understand finance. Progress was being made. Today, Luis manages the businesses and finances of some of the most iconic, internationally recognized Latino celebrities. But don't worry, if your abuelita walked into his office seeking financial advice without an appointment, Luis would make her feel like his number one client, just as he would want anyone to treat his parents in the same situation, with respect and dignity. Hey everyone, my name is Nicholas Aguirre. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Luis Barajas. He's a wealth and business manager, and he's the owner and founder of Lab Wealth and Business Management. Luis Barajas, thank you for coming onto the show today.
Nicholas, my pleasure.
Now, Luis, something about me, just me personally, I've always had an affinity for finance. I think it all started when I'm in my dad's truck when I was younger, and I'm listening to talk radio, and in the middle of the stations or the programs, they talk about the stock market, right? The Dow Jones, all these acronyms that I had no idea whether it was good, whether they're going up and down, or 5,000 points and went up, 20,000 points and went down. That was my first introduction to finance, I guess. And I never knew what those numbers or what those acronyms really meant. And every time I tried to Google and find these answers, I just felt like it just led me to a rabbit hole that was confusing. I'm literate, I know how to read, but it just seems like with the vernacular that the finance world uses, it just seems like it's kind of meant to confuse people some way. And I've always just been confused my whole life. So I invited you onto the show today so that way you could help educate us Latinos to help understand the finance world, because I know it goes beyond the stock market. It goes beyond savings. So I found the best of the best I could in the Latino finance world. You came up. I think one day I just Googled Latino and finance, and I read an article from CNBC, and I was like, that's the man I want on my show. So I just want to say this is why you're on the show today, so you could help educate us Latinos, so we could help understand this jargon, this vernacular, so we don't get lost in all this terminology, and so we could just have a better understanding of the finance world.
Well, you're starting the way I started, right? But I'll give you a quick background of just how I got started and had the same kind of feelings as you did. When I was 11 years old, my dad had lost a couple jobs and was starting his own company, and he had me help him out with the paperwork, right? And and then a couple of years after that, the IRS shows up to my dad's door and asks him to do a tax return that he hadn't done. And so my dad asked me if I can help him with that. And I said, well, what's that? And so all of a sudden, I'm thrust into business in East Los Angeles, not because I wanted to, because I had to, because I was being the eldest. And when you're the oldest of immigrant parents who don't really speak English, not only are you their translator, but you're the one that's put there in front of the adults and trying to figure everything out. And so they're throwing words out that at the age of 13, 14, 15, loans, equity lines of credit, setting up an entity. What the hell's an entity, right? And you're 13, 15 years old, you don't know. And so I made a commitment to my father that one day that I would go to college and then learn everything there was about money and finance and business. And you're right. It's a world where there's intimidation, There's confusion. One person says this is good for you. The other person says this is bad for you. And at the end of the day, it's just a form of the industry to keep us almost enslaved to them, almost not from attracting, the financial freedom that we're looking for, because you were attracted to maybe all these things that were going on in the Dow, whatever. But at the end of the day, you just wanted to have money in your pocket. And you were wondering that if you learned about these things, that you would be financially independent or happy. And it is not complicated. It is the most simple thing that you can possibly do. And now today, going back like 30 years from now, from when I first started in the business, I will share with you that things are getting even more simpler. And I think that all the power is being given back to the individual.
So let's start with something basic. Finance has so many, like I said earlier, finance has so many aspects to it outside of the stock market, outside of savings. How would you define the finance world?
Well, look, the finance world is just basically what we call the capital markets, right? And people do get confused. Look, it is just somebody who has an idea, who wants to sell that service, that idea, whatever product that they've come up with, and they need to build a business. And that business needs money. And then that business continues to grow. And that money originally comes from their credit cards, from their equity in their home. It comes from loans from their brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers. And then it continues to grow. And then it starts looking for capital. It starts looking for money from other people, other investors. And then those companies get big enough where now they're asking for money for other investors. And that's what the world of finance is. It's just capitalizing or basically lending money or giving money. And in some places, if you lend it, you're basically doing what are called now bonds. And if you're giving money to these companies, you're buying shares. And that's the stock market. That's what you were listening to, the Dow Jones and everything else. So it's nothing more than you and I having an idea to sell, platanitos maduros in a different format, in some kind of jar or something. And that's it. It's really, really not complicated more than that.
With your definition, what kind of financial services do you offer?
So in the world of financial planning, I would say that about 97% of the industry is either commission-based or what's called fee-based. They're people who are product-driven and just sell product, okay? And I will share with you that those are not financial planners or wealth managers. They're financial salespeople, but they don't call themselves that. And they earn a commission. And at the end of the day, we know that they have your best interest at heart, but at the end of the day, if they don't make any money unless they sell you something. So I am what's called a fee only. I think less than 3% of the entire population in the financial planning industry that do financial planning or wealth management are fee only. Fee only people do not earn a commission. They are by law what are called fiduciaries. They have to have your best interest. And so what I do is I meet with an individual, a family, a business owner, and I look at their entire finances and show them how to build wealth. Or take the money that they've got and invest it towards what? Towards their specific goals and time frame and risk tolerance. So I'm not only looking at investing their money, but I'm looking at their estate plan in case if they pass away, how are they going to transfer the money that they've saved to their children? I'm looking at the insurance. Again, I don't sell insurance products, but I make sure that they have the right amount of insurance, whether it's for their home, their autos, their life, their disability, their health. So in case something bad happens to them, they're protected and they don't use all their money and end up bankrupt, right? I'm taking a look at their taxes because, you'll pay more money in taxes than in anything else over your lifetime. So we're looking at who's doing your tax return and if they're using the most tax efficient methods to lower your tax liability every year. So it's all these pieces. Nobody can see us because we're on a podcast, but what I do is I have a puzzle box. Here it is. It's a puzzle box, and they can hear it shaking. And Nicholas, you'll attest to that. It's covered in white, right? Yeah. And what I normally do is I will open up the puzzle box, and if they can hear, I'm getting thousands of pieces out, and I tell people, look, your finances are all these pieces put together. It's just not about the investing, and I have to put it together. But if you and I don't spend time getting to know each other and getting to know what your dreams are, what you're trying to accomplish, see, then you have to paint the picture for me, so then I can start putting these pieces and align them so we have the highest best use of your resources and get you to where you want to be. And so Most people won't even spend the time to get to know what your dreams are, what your hopes are, what you're really trying to accomplish, because money is just a tool to help you live a better life. Because at the end of the day, Nicholas, you and I, 100 years from now, we're not going to be here. We're not going to take any of our wealth with us. And as somebody once told me, I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. You're not going to take anything with you. So money's a tool to have you live a more balanced and happier life. But as you see, most people really struggle with money. They live paycheck to paycheck. They're unhappy. The number one cause of divorce is money and not communicating properly with money. So that's what finance, and that's kind of what our services are.
So for your business model, it seems like you really want to get to know the person, not just sell them a product right away and take home a commission, but you really, really want to get to know this person so you could have their financial best interest in your mind, correct?
That's correct. So the financial planning industry has duped us into believing that financial planning is about a product, but it's not. It's about a process, and it's about people. It's about really getting to know the people that you're working with, and then there's a process to the whole to the madness of what you're trying to do. Financial planning is getting to know about people's fears, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, goals, and then figuring out, that's the behavioral side, right? And then taking that and with their dreams and their goals, and then putting together a plan that's going to help them get there. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years, and no matter what plan I've done for any client, 5 years, that plan's never going to be the same as what you originally thought, because life changes. In Spanish, they say, "What la vida da muchas vueltas." And so, people die, people get divorced, people lose their jobs, people become disabled. And so those are things you have to protect against, or prepare for as well. And nobody thinks about those things. But that's what true financial planning is looking at the comprehensive, at the well-being of the individual.
So for your business, you're trying to avoid selling products because those products don't have the person's best interest in mind. Could you give an example to people out there of those products so that way they could be more aware of it?
Yeah. So here's an example. Here's a great example. So let's say, Nicholas, you get married and you have a kid, right? And you come to me and you want to do education planning. You know what? You're thinking, darn, it was really hard for me. I had to work when I was in college, and it was hard to work and study, and I just don't want my son or my daughter to go through that. So if you were sitting with a financial planner, most of them would be talking to you about, well, let's think about what your child is going to need and how much money, and then we're going to use this product called 529. A 529 plan is a college savings account. And they're going to try to get you to open up that product, and then from there they'll earn a commission from that sale of that product.
How much do you think commission they'll get?
Well, the commission could be anywhere 4 or 5% of whatever they're selling, right? But here's what we need to do, though. The problem is that we need to think about what's in the best interest of that child. Now, let's say that you're now seeing me with your child's like maybe 11, 12 years old, and you're maybe 6 years away from going to college. Nobody's going to dare and ask you, hey, can you bring your child's report card to me? They're not going to say that, because let me ask you, if you had a child and he was getting C's and D's and maybe an F or two, it didn't matter and had low self-esteem, low test-taking abilities, wasn't in a family that was very supportive. I don't care if you and I saved $1 million. Most likely, this child will not finish college. They will not have what I call the knowledge, ability, skills, and habits. CASH, knowledge, ability, skills, and habits. The acronym is CASH, is to get in it and get through college. So again, we always talk about how Latinos, aren't really going and graduating at the pace that we should be graduating at, right? So we need to ask those questions, because if all of a sudden the parent has to say $300 a month to put away for their college education, and I know that they don't have the knowledge or the abilities or the skills or the habits to get in and get through, we're going to take that and we're going to hire a counselor, a tutor. We're going to go get family counseling. We're going to get them tutoring for math, tutoring for English. That money's better spent there than on a 529 plan. Don't you think?
Definitely.
So let me ask you, so how is that financial planner selling a product going to do that if he's not going to earn any money from that? We're not going to be able to bill you for that time.
It sounds like it's not in his best interest.
It's not in his best interest. Same thing for retirement planning. A client comes to me, I'll give you one more example. You come in with your wife and you want to start saving for retirement, right? And so all of a sudden, one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, Nicholas, and I don't know, Judith, let's say her name is Judith, who you're going to marry. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your marriage? Both of you will tell me a 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, where is your marriage? And most men are pretty much, delusional of where they're at. They'll say, oh, I'm at an 8 or 9. It could always be better. Sometimes I've had those spouses tell me, the wives telling me the truth. Well, they'll say, well, I'm probably at a 5 or a 6. And I say, oh, man. I said, where would you have to be on that scale to be contemplating divorce? And they'll say, probably at a level 4. So if I take a $500 a month and put it in a 401k plan or some mutual fund or some ETF or some kind of investment account, I'm probably saving that money for the divorce attorney. Versus if we took that money and if that marriage isn't strong to survive some kind of tragedy in their household, then we need to get that marriage stronger. So sometimes I'll suggest that we take that $500 and go through marriage counseling until I can get that other spouse, instead of at a 5 or a 6, to level 8 or 9. And so usually when couples are aligned with their values, they're happy together, they can see a much better future in front of them. And so usually when one couple is not as committed as the other person and things have happened in that relationship, somehow they sabotage that retirement savings plan for whatever reason happens. And eventually there'll be some level of divorce, because remember, over 50% of our population gets divorced. And so that's a different approach to financial planning that I think most people are out there doing.
I don't think another salesperson too will even really care too much of where that couple's relationship is at, right? On a scale of 1 through 10, they'll just never ask those questions.
Well, I think not saying that they don't care is different than saying they don't have the business model to support that, right? And so what happens, they probably do care, but the thing is that if they don't do a sale that day, their kids don't eat, right? They don't pay their rent. And so I go back to, at the end of the day, right now, there are a lot of tools for people to just kind of do financial planning on their own that weren't around because of technology. The clients that I attract are clients that tend to be more executives or people who are really busy. Or I get a lot of creative people. I got a lot of celebrities that are mostly in the music and film industry, and they're so busy building their careers that they want to build a team of people that they can trust, right? So we're one of those strategic alliances for them. So that's what I do. But if you're too busy, then you need to hire somebody. If you're not, you can take care of it yourself these days.
Quick story. I just want to say, you brought back memories of when you said, if you had an imaginary couple here and their child wasn't getting good grades, well, it's better to invest that money in tutoring or something else, right? I remember my mom put me in a Catholic school, so obviously she's paying tuition every month, right? And I think I got a D. And of all classes in my Spanish class, she was pissed because she's like, why am I going to pay all this money if you're just not going to end up going to college? She took me out. But she didn't put me in tutoring. She didn't do anything like that. She didn't reinvest in me. She put me in a public school. She says, if you're gonna go fail, at least go fail for free. And then she ended up buying herself a new car. And the irony is that I ended up getting better grades at the public school than I did at the private school. But you just brought back a memory.
That's a great story.
So I really want people to get to know you, because I think how you got into finance is really fascinating. I always do this with every guest because, we are Latinos. We do come from, our grandparents, our parents do come from other countries.
Yeah.
Where did your parents come from, and where did you grow up in Los Angeles?
Yeah. So my parents are, my dad's from Guadalajara or Tepatitlán, and my mom is from Nogales, Sonora. They met at a very young age and gave birth to me in Boyle Heights in East Los Angeles. And I'll tell you, I've got the best parents in the world, the most loving parents. My parents didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I didn't need that money. The love and support that they gave me, to this day is really important for me. But my dad's an entrepreneur, has been an entrepreneur at heart. And again, since I was a young kid, my dad started his own ornamental iron business. For people who don't know what that is, that's wrought iron. My dad did window guards and fences and all of that. A joke I used to use, I ended up working at a big firm called Kenneth Leventhal, where everybody was really super wealthy, and even the people that worked there were doing okay. And I would ask them what their parents did, and their parents were always like doctors and lawyers, and they would ask me, what did your parents do? And I said, well, my parents were in the iron and steel business. And my mom irons and my dad steels. So that was a joke. That's a joke I had heard, and so that's a terrible joke to say. But no, I had a wonderful childhood, and because of my father, I learned a lot about business, but I didn't learn anything that had to do with the accounting side or the tax side, that was learned because that was the side that my dad needed help with, right? And so at first it was more of a level of responsibility. I really wanted to learn it to help my parents out. It wasn't because I had a love for it. And then I realized that was one of my unique abilities. It just came naturally to me.
What kind of like account situations were you hit with when you were helping out your dad's business? Like, what was the first situation where you were thrown into that you had to learn about finance right then and there?
Well, it's your dad gets audited by the IRS, and you got to go help him out and handle the IRS situation, and you realize that you only know so much, right? And so the way I learned was through books. And right away, I didn't have any mentors. So in the community that we lived in, just so you know, I don't even think as of last night there's a bookstore. Maybe there might be a bookstore at East L.A. College, but that's Monterey Park. And there might have been a bookstore where they sell most of the religious, right, the Bibles and stuff on Whittier Boulevard. But back then there was no books, and so I wanted to help my dad with his tax return. So my dad drove me, I think, 13 miles to Hacienda Heights to go find a bookstore back then, and I read it from cover to cover. And I was a young kid, and so I fell in love with that. I fell in love, like, to me, taxes are like putting the pieces together and figuring out how we can pay less. So that was probably my first instance. But, my dad went and he bought my grandmother's home, and he had to go get a loan. And they had to go to various lenders because they wouldn't lend the money. And so you start realizing that because my parents didn't have a lot of money, they weren't treated with the same level of respect that I would see other people being treated when I was at a bank. And so to me, at this point, when I work with clients who don't have a lot of money, because people see me now on television, they know that I've written books, and they know that I read a lot of articles, but we never turn anybody down, because that's been the whole love. I created this company to be able to give access to people just like my parents. And so what happens is that at the end of the day, we just want to give people what I call financial dignity. I wanted people to treat my parents with respect, right? That's the same thing we're doing here. And so having that is very, very different than somebody who grew up, in a very rich area who wouldn't understand that. We have to hold hands more with the clients. We actually do a lot more for them than just give them advice. I learned that just giving advice isn't enough. So if you go to my website, you'll see that it says financial doing versus financial planning, because that's where the biggest value is that we do a lot of the work for the clients, because I would send them home and to make sure they got a trust or got insurance or whatever. And I'd see them back 6 months to a year from now, and they'd go home and just life happened and they got really busy, because again, when you're not making a lot of money, you're working 2 jobs sometimes just to make it through. So that's how, that's from being a kid, I continue to remember those memories of having immigrant parents who didn't have the knowledge, who didn't have the language skills, and how they were not treated the way I think I would want my parents to be treated. So that's what we do here.
So you piqued my curiosity. Like I said, I started off the podcast by saying in the beginning, when I was younger, when I looked up anything with finance, I had a hard time reading about it. I was financially literate. This book that you picked up, how were you not confused by the language about how to do a tax return or anything like that? Like, was it intimidating to you? Did you understand it? Or did you just have that gift that, I could read a financial book at the age of, let's say, 15, and it came easy to you?
Yeah, so I didn't know that. It didn't come easy to me, but somehow I enjoyed it. So, one of the things that we talk about is when you talk to most financial planners, they always talk about doing a budget. And so one of the things that I focus on is not doing a budget, but how do you make more money, right? So, Nicholas, if I were working with you, I would ask you, how much do you make, and my job would be, besides to do the budget for you and get you the right insurance and the investments and everything else, was to also figure out how to make more money. And so the way I would do that, I would find out what your unique abilities are, or we call it in Spanish, tus dones, right? Mm-hmm. Your gifts. And so the problem is that most people who have gifts or unique abilities don't know that they have it, because it becomes so easy to them. So I didn't realize back then that was a gift that I had, or un don, that I could piece these things together. And to this day, one of the things that we use at our firm is, always do the ABCDs of finance. And the ABCDs always be connecting dots. And so meaning that when you read something, it's just whatever you see there, it goes beyond that, and you have to connect all the dots that are going to create consequences to what you're actually doing. And so, no, it actually did come easy to me, but I didn't realize that till later on in life. Yeah. So
after that book, did you just become hooked on books? Like, did you tell your dad, take me back to the bookstore to buy more financial books?
Well, what happened is I had an uncle who used to love books. I mean, he used to love books and he used to buy books and I used to read them with him. Yeah, I've been a book. I've had at some points, I think, people talk about, I've got some really wealthy clients who talk about the number of bottles of wine they have in their home. I talk about the number of books that I've had in my home. I literally have had as many as like 3,000 or 4,000 books in my home. We recently moved to a new house and I donated or gave close to like 1,800 books.
Oh, wow.
And I kept a couple thousand of them. In fact, in my house right now, they're building a new library for me so I can put all the books in the new home. And as you see here, these are just a little bit of the books that I have in my office. But books are what got me out of the barrio, to be quite honest with you.
When you were coming of age, you found out you were thrown into a situation where you were helping your dad with accounting. I guess little by little, you were finding a little interest in finance. This leads me to adulthood now. Where did you go to college and what did you do for undergrad?
Yeah, so know that I grew up in East L.A., but again, when you don't have a lot of money, your parents aren't rich. My dad had a business, but he struggled. It was paycheck to paycheck still. And I ended up going to UCLA. And when I was there, let me step back. Because I didn't know that business was so easy for me, I finished high school a little bit early, and I did one of those ROP programs where they take you. And so what happened is I signed up for a class to become a licensed medical assistant at the age of 17 in West Covina. So I graduated top of that class. I became a licensed medical assistant at the age of I was 17 years old. And I ended up working at a clinic. And everybody loved me because I used to draw blood and everything else. So I got accepted to UCLA. I applied to UCLA and Stanford, got accepted to UCLA, and went in as a pre-med major. And it was the worst horrific experience of my life. I got there, and they have this thing called weeding out courses.
Yeah.
All right. And you take a class at UCLA called like Chem 11A, Bio 5, and they go, look to your left, look to your right, and only one of you will be here next quarter. So I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and they were both Asian. There's an Asian gal next to me, an Asian guy. I go, oh shit, that's me. That's going to be me next quarter. I'm not going to be here. And high school was very easy for me. I got straight A's, right? I go to UCLA and I study night and day for C's, right? And I realized I'm not going to make it. I go see a counselor and I end up changing majors to become a sociology major. I don't know why I became a sociology major, but now after doing all the writing and that I do, and it was probably the best major I could have selected. But I had a roommate named Robert Testa who came in and who told me that after he graduated from college, he was going to go get a master's in business and an MBA. And I said, well, what's that? I've never heard of an MBA. And long story short, he never ends up getting an MBA, but I ended up going to UCLA graduate and then going to Claremont Graduate University and getting my master's in business with a emphasis in finance. And so because I loved it so much. Now, during that time while I was getting my MBA, I applied for a company to work at a financial planning company because I wanted to learn everything about the way you were learning stocks and bonds and mutual funds. And I ended up working for a financial planning firm in Pasadena, California. And I was the number one financial planner in that firm, but I was probably the bottom of the scale of people selling product. And so I learned to love financial planning, but at the same time, after I graduated from getting my MBA, I became very depressed and worked in the financial planning industry for about 3 years and said, I quit. I said, I will never be a financial planner because I was actually being pushed into selling products to people that didn't need them or couldn't afford them. And I wanted to do the right thing. So I left the financial planning industry back in 1987, I think, saying I will never, ever work in financial planning again. And here I am, right? 30 years later.
I want to go back a little bit. Throughout your years at UCLA, when you were undergrad, majoring in sociology, were you still helping your dad in the financial aspect?
To this day. I mean, my dad just recently retired a couple of years ago. My dad's 81 now, but I've helped him the whole time. I ended up working at a big firm and at Kenneth Leventhal, and then even went back to the barrio for over a decade to help people in the community. Yeah, I've always been there to help my parents out the whole time.
I had to ask because sociology and finance is just on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
You would think, right? You would really think, but they're not. Believe it or not, most attorneys are English majors. Most doctors are English majors. I think what happened is the sociology major brought that nonprofit world in my head. I think it was always looking at society and people and how they make decisions. And to be quite honest with you, I think that sociology, even psychology, would be a wonderful major for people going into being, fee-only financial planners, because you're dealing with, again, I go back to, remember, the financial planning industry has conned us into that financial planning is about a product. It's really about people. So if you're in psychology, sociology, you're dealing with people. And so the better you are at understanding people and behavioral finance, the better wealth manager, financial planner you're going to be.
I want to go back to the roommate that you had that you mentioned. He mentioned he wanted to go get an MBA. So that piqued your interest. What made you pique your interest about getting an MBA? What exactly did he tell you?
Well, what he told me, first of all, that there was a master's in business. And remember, when I was there, UCLA didn't have, I don't think they had an MBA program back then. It was USC that had an MBA program. And I didn't know that you could study business, because it was like, well, why would I study business if I already know business, right? I knew about marketing my dad's business. I knew about accounting. I knew about taxes. I knew about insurance. And then you realize, no, you can learn a lot more to help, like bigger companies. And so that's what piqued my interest. And I got, when I got accepted, to USC and Claremont. I decided to go to Claremont because everybody was telling me that there was a professor there named Peter Drucker. And if you don't know who Peter Drucker is, if you read any business book, and going forward, now that I've mentioned this name, you're going to hear his name, but he is quoted in every business book you've ever read. And the reason for that, he's like the father of business schools. And somebody said, it would be an honor for you to go to Claremont because Peter Drucker's there, and he's like the god of business. And I was very fortunate to have him in several classes and learn with Peter Drucker. So that even piqued my interest even more. So yeah, and like I said, if it weren't for him, I don't think I would have gotten my MBA. So and I was glad that I did. Now, a lot of people always ask me about an MBA. Would you do it now? I don't know if I'd get an MBA now. The world has changed dramatically back since 1987, 88, right? I think that the world of business moves so fast now, and the world's moving so fast that I think that anybody learning anything in college, outside of accounting, obviously, accounting hasn't changed in a couple hundred years or whatever, or even longer, 1,000 years probably. It's some of the material being taught in college is probably really old stuff. And so I don't know if I would have gotten my master's now, but back then it was really important. And I think that allowed me to go work with one of the big firms out in Newport Beach, California.
So while you were getting your MBA, you said you worked as a financial planner in Pasadena, correct?
I did.
And you said you didn't like that job because you were forced to push products?
That's it.
Kind of like how we started this podcast, right? How there's two different worlds. Those people that are just pushing products, and there's people like you who have the best interest in the individual.
Let me give you an example real quick. So you're out there talking to somebody in the community, and one of the goals is that you have to build what I call a strong financial foundation. Part of the financial foundation is you have to build emergency reserves. You really do. And so the best place to put emergency reserves, they must remain liquid. Liquid means that you can take the money out without any penalties, take out the money whenever you want. So most of the time, that's a bank. You just need to have the money in a regular savings bank, right? Well, back then, you can open up a savings account, but they would do what was called a product called an annuity. An annuity was an insurance product in which in that product, you can open up a savings account through the annuity, but that would have a 5% commission when you were only earning 3%, right? And so I would tell them the right thing, which was like, do you have an account? Where do you bank at? And they go, well, Bank of America. Well, you need to open up, do you have a savings account? No, they have a checking account. Well, let's go to the bank and open up a savings account, and we can start putting $50 a month in there until you have a certain amount of money. Then the difference, then we'll start investing. But it's going to take you about 1.5 years to do that. And then we'll go to the next level. And I'd go back to the office and said, you could have done the same thing and put an annuity. I said, yeah, but the person would not make any money for 2 years. And I would charge like 5% when they're only earning 3% in the bank. And that was back then. And
I'm sure they weren't too happy.
And no. And they put a lot of pressure. And at some point, I just realized that I wasn't going to survive because I wasn't bringing enough revenue for the company to sell product, right? And so I realized they didn't have the client's best interest at heart. I get it. It's a business, but it's not the business that I wanted to be in.
So after you graduated from Claremont with your MBA, where did you get your first job after you getting your MBA?
Well, I ended up being very disenchanted with the financial planning industry. I applied to go, and I thought, well, I already had an MBA. I was already going through the program. It's called the Certified Financial Planning Program. Back then, it was the Denver College of Financial Planning. I was also doing that. And I realized that the next level, since I knew accounting, remember my background wasn't in accounting though. My background, I was a sociology major and MBA in finance. But I thought, well, why not go and get a CPA, right? And so I didn't have a background in accounting, but I had a strong tax background because I've been doing taxes for such a long time for my parents and a bunch of other people. So I applied to this firm out in Newport Beach, California called Kenneth Leventhal. And I got the job. It happened to be that the person who got my resume was this lady named Susan Macris, who had graduated from UCLA, I think was a sociology major as well, and said, hey, you don't really have the background to go into this big accounting firm, consulting firm, but since you're a UCLA grad and you're a Bruin, a sociology major, I'm going to give you a shot. It's up to you to try to win the partners over. And I did. And I ended up working in some really, really high-profile accounts back then. Kenneth Leventhal were the superstars of the real estate industry, and their clients back then were Donald Trump. I don't know if I hate to say this today, but Donald Trump, Donald Bren of the Irvine Company. If you ever go to UC Irvine, you'll see that a lot of it is called the Bren Center. So Donald Bren was one of our clients, who was a billionaire, right? Our clients were billionaire, millionaire clients. And they knew that I was doing financial planning, and financial planners were not working in accounting firms back then. And they wanted to start more consulting with the personal finances for some of their super wealthy clients. And I started doing personal financial planning to some multimillionaires and billionaires.
So how did you win the partners over? What did you tell them, or what experience did you have working in your dad's business that made you seem qualified for the job?
Well, I think that because of my dad and because of the level of responsibility that I had, and because I was also at that point now helping other people in the barrio with their businesses, I would also guide a lot of my dad's friends and other people that would ask for help. I have built a very entrepreneurial spirit. And so that entrepreneurial spirit is, I didn't come in, when you go work at a big firm, nobody wants you to look at your watch. You don't want to come in at 9 and leave at 5. So I always did what I had to do when I had to do it. And sometimes that would be doing work from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so I think what they saw, besides me having this broader type of experience, they saw me hungry. They saw eyes that I wasn't going to come in at 9 and leave at 5. You know, a lot of people continue to do that to the day that's an employee. And so they, you know, and if you're ever going to achieve anything in life, being a watch looker, you know, where you see what time it is and what time you have to leave, you're never going to succeed. That's not how life works. And it's never worked that way. And if you ever want any shot of being a partner or having some equity, some ownership, you've got to go above and beyond. And so I was already willing to do that because I already had that work ethic. And I think that's what I won them over.
So for Kenneth Leventhal, what exactly you were doing was financial planning, correct? So, but
I was doing tax work. Okay. I was doing audit work. I was doing consulting work, and we were doing some financial planning work.
So you personally, you were doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and just remember, Nicholas, you probably don't know, but financial planning is really an industry that's only been around for like 40 years, max. Back then, there was no such thing as financial planning. It's a relatively new industry.
How did your experience working at a big firm like that open your eyes to the professional world and to the financial world?
So working at Kenneth Leventhal, which is now part of Ernst & Young, opened my eyes to thinking that I said, one day I'm going to work with the biggest firms in the country, or I'm going to achieve something that I haven't achieved, right? And I used to think that working in the barrio or helping my dad was small potatoes, and I was going to be this big chief working at a big firm. You know, I realized that it wasn't much different than I was doing before. In fact, to be quite honest with you, I realized that if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, and if I got to be successful, I don't know if I'd end up taking my business to a big firm, because they don't provide the same attention that more of a medium or smaller firm provides. I learned that just because I lacked the experience, not the knowledge, but the experience, I felt that what working at Kenneth Leventhal gave me is that they gave me the confidence to realize that I already knew what I knew and I could get better, and I really didn't need them. But I really kind of, it's ironic, right? It's irony, because I needed them so I can feel like I was playing with the big boys, And at the same time, I realized, hey, the big boys aren't any smarter than I am. I thought, wow, they must know something that I don't. And they must be better. They must do things differently. They must use software that's different. And they weren't. What they were is they were very well organized, they're just big machines. And they were great at attracting a lot of the young kids coming out of school and paying them literally nothing, to be quite honest with you. So I learned a lot, but at the same time, I also learned how to do things a little bit more organized, how to take more precaution, how to look at the bigger picture. So I learned a lot. But again, at the same time, you realize, hey, you can put the same level of effort. You don't have to work at those big firms if you don't want to.
And from what I understand from your story is that you were there for a while and you decided to quit and I guess open up a firm in East Los Angeles, correct?
In Boyle Heights. So I had really in 1990, had several things happen to me that changed my entire life. I will share with you that the love of my life was also beyond my parents, was my grandmother. My mom got pregnant with me and had me at the age of 16, right? And so your grandmother is also a very important person in your life when your parents are so young. And so I also had an uncle, her eldest son, who used to love books. And that's one of the reasons I think I told you earlier that the reason I read so many books because my uncle loved books as well. That's where I learned that, and that's got me out of the barrio. So I got a call while I was working at Kenneth Leventhal that my grandmother wasn't feeling well. And make a long story short, she ends up dying from the complications of a heart attack. First person in my life to pass away that meant so much to me. So just a short time thereafter, my uncle ends up committing suicide. And the death of his mother or my grandmother really affected him, was going through some marital problems, some emotional problems as well, commit suicide. And then shortly thereafter, my daughter's born. And on the day that my daughter's born, I meet a gentleman at a coffee shop who changed my life. And I stopped off the house to go get a bag for my wife. I stopped off at the Renaissance Cafe in Lake Forest, California. And I went to go get a cup of coffee and a bagel. I'm putting cream cheese on my bagel. And some guy comes next to me and says, hey, do you mind if I sit in the chair next to you? And I said, no, I'm leaving. I got to go to the hospital. My wife just had birth to our first daughter. But I was putting cream cheese on the bagel. And I was thinking about how my daughter was never going to meet my grandmother or my uncle, who had just recently passed away. So I wasn't crying or anything. I was just sad. And as I was getting off of my chair, I said, sit in my chair. My chair has a cushion. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, are you okay? And I guess he said, if you just told me you just had a baby, right? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, you look really sad. And I said, yeah. And then I started telling the story about my grandmother and my uncle. I don't know if the conversation was with him 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 15 minutes, but I went to the hospital after what he told me, and it literally changed my life. I went back to the hospital, told my dad after they arrived a few hours later after the birth of our daughter. I talked to my dad. I said, Dad, I just met somebody who's just changed my life. And my dad was really happy. I said, I'm going to go back to Boyle Heights and help the underserved. I've been very blessed. I've been given an incredible experience, incredible education, lots of knowledge. And back then, Nicholas, I think that 40 to 50% of our community, the Latino community, was unbanked. Forget about, unbanked, okay? Not using any banks. And I thought that I could make a difference. And so I quit my job. I go to Kenneth Leventhal and I give them literally a 1-day notice. They don't want me to quit. Back then you could what call bank your time if you had overtime. I had like 3 months paid. And so they said, no, don't quit. We're going to let you go back to the barrio, go help the poor. You're going to be back. You're not going to make it. And I left and I never came back. It was 15 years I was in the barrio working with them. And I realized when I went back that there were bigger challenges than I had even thought about. But I did it. And that's kind of part of the story. And so I'll take you because every people who are listening to is going to say, who was that guy that you met?
I was about to ask you that right now. Who is that gentleman?
Well, here, long story, and I'm going to bring you back. So I end up going to the barrio and I realized that no amount of financial literacy was going to help our community. See, what happens is, Nicholas, when you're poor, you don't realize you're poor, especially when you have loving parents. Then you leave and you go and you do well and you succeed and you hang around with wealthier people and your mind starts to change, but you don't realize that. Then I go back to the barrio, and then I'm trying to help the poor. Now, really armed with all the financial information and the financial experience that anybody could probably give to a community. But I realized I wasn't making a difference. And the difference was that I couldn't change the mindset of that community. So I started writing a book. I saw a comedian named George Lopez back then, before George Lopez had become really, really famous at the ISIS. And he would make these really brutal jokes about our Latino community and money. And I realized that if I can take some of what he was doing and place it and talk about money and do some speeches and seminars and talk to them. I started doing these seminars at the local library that was literally down the street over there at Whittier in Indiana, a couple blocks away. There's a library there. And they had a little room where I could kind of do some seminars. And somebody said, you should turn it into a book. Well, about 8-9 years later, after I left and came back, I turned it into a book, and it got published with a company named HarperCollins. And guess what? The gentleman that I met like 9-10 years earlier at that coffee shop had also written a book with the same publisher that same year. It's like a decade later. The guy who changed my life. Well, that guy has gone to sell that book. He sold 38 million copies so far.
Oh, wow.
Right? I think I've sold 38 copies, mostly to my mom. Hopefully you bought one on Amazon. And the book is called A Purpose-Driven Life. A guy named Rick Warren, a pastor named Rick Warren, right, at a big church, Saddleback Church here in Orange County, California. And that day, he spoke to me about a purpose-driven life. And that's what changed me. And my whole life has been about purpose and giving back and helping others. And it's been quite challenging, believe it or not, but I did it. And so that's when I wrote that very same year, the Latino Journey to Financial Greatness, which was how to overcome limiting cultural beliefs about money in our community. And so yeah, it's been a long journey.
If you don't mind sharing, during that conversation, I guess from what he told you, you just had a daughter, you look a little sad, to the end of the conversation where he completely changed your life. I guess, what did he tell you, or how did he make you realize to go back to East L.A. and to live and just to change business plans or change life plans?
Well, he asked me, we were just talking, and I shared a little bit about my life, and I was telling him that where I'd come from, and he said that I had been really blessed, and I had a lot, and that life was not about me. And it was not about my ego. It was about helping others, right? He also mentioned to me that we're all born with a purpose. And it is the wise people who focus on that purpose. And I realized that my purpose was always in my heart to give back, because even when I was at UCLA, I worked at a program called the UCLA Partnership Program, where I would work in the local high schools in East L.A. at Garfield High School, Roosevelt High School. I would work at the local junior high schools, and we would get Latino students to come to summer programs or programs at UCLA to get them out of their community so they can see something different. So my heart was always in giving back. And something that I already mentioned to you in this podcast, where he said, Louis, I've been back then. Now he actually is a pastor of this mega church, right? But back then, his church was on dirt floors and a tent.
Wow.
And he said, Louis, I'm this pastor of this very small church in Lake Forest, California, but I've got some very wealthy clients and some poor clients. And one thing I know for sure, because as a pastor, you do a lot of, you go to funerals and do the processions. And he said, I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. In this life, you're not going to take anything with you. And the most important things in life aren't things. And it seems like you're a very blessed young man, and you're going to do wonderful things with your life. And I hope you're able to think about not just yourself, but what others. And the passing of your grandmother and the passing of your uncle have probably made you think about what's important in life. And I said, yes, it has. And just kind of that and some other thoughts, and that, he told me, and went back and realized that I met this man for a reason and a purpose. And it was a very synchronistic event, meeting him. And to this day, I feel very grateful having met him. And my life really has been blessed, to be quite honest with you.
So you said after that conversation that changed your life. That's a huge statement to make. You went back to Kenneth Leventhal. You told him you're going to go back to East L.A. What was your first plan? What was your first initiation of plan to open up business back in East L.A.?
So my father owned AB Ornamental Iron on Whittier and Calzona. It's still there. If you drive by there in East L.A., you're going to see a big yellow sign that says AB Ornamental Iron. He owns 2 lots, and his ornamental iron shop that he no longer is there was in the back, and in the front there was this building that was a little supermarket. My dad turned it into a restaurant. He realized he couldn't run a restaurant, so he ended up leasing it out, called Boca del Rio. And above Boca del Rio, there were 2 apartments. When I told my dad I was going to go back to East L.A., my dad was really happy because I've always helped him. And he said, "Mijo, regresate and I will help you. You don't have to pay rent if you don't want to for a few months until you get on your feet." But it's funny, for the first time in 15 years, my dad says the 2 apartments above the restaurant are empty. Why don't you convert them into an office and you can start your business there? And that's what I did. I went back to the barrio. I went on Whittier and Calzona above a seafood restaurant across the street from a body shop, and I opened up my business there.
That's opening up the business, but how did you actually get people through the door to listen?
I didn't. And what happens is, how like if you like a great baker, or you make a great pasta or a great, enchilada dish, and all your friends and family will tell you, "Oh my God, you should open up a restaurant." And then you open up that restaurant and they never go to your restaurant.
Yeah.
So what happened was they didn't. And so my dad is a brilliant businessman. And my dad says, "Mijo, I know you want to help the community out. I know you want to help them with financial planning." He goes, "But this community, the only thing that they're made that's mandatory is taxes. He goes, do their tax returns, get them in, and then you can talk to them about financial planning." So I literally made like 2,500 flyers, and I literally walked every house in that neighborhood, like 2,500 homes, and placed flyers and spoke to the people, said I just opened up my business. And, I didn't tell them that I had been working just back then with Donald Trump or Donald Brand and all these people. What happened was, about 1.5 years later, there was a gentleman named George Ramos, who was the columnist for the Los Angeles Times, one of the best columnists they've ever had. And he would write stories on some of the big stuff that I was working on at Kenneth Leventhal. I worked on some really high profile cases back in the 80s. And he would call me. Well, he calls and asks for me at Kenneth Leventhal, and he says, "No, Mr. Barajas is no longer here." "Where is he?" He goes, "We don't have a forwarding address. He moved, or he's back in East L.A. He goes, "What?" Well, he hunts me down. He finds me. And he's blown away that I've left Kenneth Leventhal to come back to Boyle Heights and work there. And he says, "I'm going to do a story about you." And he ends up writing a story that I thought was never going to come out in the paper. Like, who would care? Mm-hmm. And it ends up being a story that's on the front page of the Metro section of the LA Times. And from that day forward, I start getting calls from National Public Radio, television, CNN, and they start asking me, what am I doing back and how am I helping people? And that's how I got to be known, and how I got to give more business, and how I got to grow my business from being, as they say, me, myself, and I, a one-person to as high as one. I think we had like 14 employees in the barrio. And I would try to bring in young Latino students from colleges, from people who had no experience in financial planning or accounting, and give them opportunities to learn it.
I want to go back a little bit. So first of all, that was a great idea by your dad to start off that way. Everyone has to do taxes,
they have to
lure them that way. So these people that were doing taxes before you, the average client that you had, where were they doing taxes at anyway?
They were, let me just tell you, they were doing taxes at the place across the street that not only did your taxes, but they sold phone cards. They were your notaries. They sold furniture. They did like mil usos, right? They did 1,000 things, and they was your tax person. Here's this guy who comes in and is basically just doing your taxes and giving you advice about your finances. And so the word spread. People were really good. What happened when I got that article in the LA Times, even Boyle Heights back then was a pretty dangerous area, and the LAPD, I had 2 LAPD officers, I kid you not, who stopped by the office. I thought they were going to ask me for money or something, because it was kind of funny, because there was no even elevator in my office. You had to walk up. And they walked up, and it was like 6 o'clock in the evening, and they just kept looking in my office, and I'm thinking, okay, are they here? I was thinking The Sopranos or something, right? They're asking for money. And these guys said, you're a really tough neighborhood. And I go, yeah, but this is the neighborhood I grew up. I feel very comfortable. He goes, well, how late do you stay? I go, well, I can stay sometimes 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Well, we cruise here around 10 o'clock at night. I'll sound my horn so you can know that I'm out there patrolling and taking care of you. So the guy had read the article in the LA Times, the police officer, and said, we're going to drive around in the evening to make sure you're safe. So I felt really protected from my own community, from the community there. Never had any problems though. It was a good thing.
When you went back to East L.A., how long after was that article written about you?
I think it was 92. So just maybe a year and a half. About a year and a half that it came out.
Okay.
Yeah, and prior to that, I was.
Prior to that was just word of mouth.
Word of mouth, but I mean, I was struggling. I had gone from making pretty good income to making nothing. I mean, literally, I was just able to pay the rent and pay for paper and toner for my printer, and was barely surviving. It was very, very difficult. The first couple of years, I really struggled. People think about, to start a business in a community that doesn't have money and you're a financial planner. It's a tough business. The other thing is you have to understand, 10 years later, I wrote a book for a community that really doesn't read books. And if they read books, trust me, there'd be a lot more Barnes & Nobles in Boyle Heights. There aren't any Barnes & Nobles in Boyle Heights. I think they had put another bookstore like in Pico Rivera that they closed down a few years after that. So I've taken the hard way, but it's been, to be quite honest with you, very satisfying, very meaningful, very purposeful.
I want to go back to those first 2 years before the article was written. So you got people in because you told them, I'll help you with your taxes. But you also gave them like a pitch, right? I guess like to help them out in other ways with their money, with other financial services. What were you trying to help them, or what was your elevator pitch to them so that way they could see money differently or see your services differently?
Yeah. So I was asking them about things that they had no clue about, right? I would say, I would take a tax return. Nicholas, I can actually take a tax return and break it down from a more of emotional and financial perspective. For example, forget about the numbers. If you look at a tax return and you see one person or two people, you say, well, if they're married, it's husband and wife. What particular issues are there? Well, are they saving for retirement? Do they have any children? You go down, they have dependents. Now they have children. They're going to have needs for insurance, right? If the parents pass away and they have a minor child, they're going to need life insurance. Now, I didn't sell it. You got to understand. So I got to talk to them. But you need life insurance. Now, here's a cultural nuance that most people don't have. So I'm talking to them and say, that if something happened to you, you should get life insurance. And there's this thing called there's cash value and term. All you need is term. It's really cheap. It's very affordable, and you should get it now. And they would, and I could convince people to buy the life insurance. But most people wouldn't buy. And when I say most people, most men wouldn't buy, because I had young families back then. And nobody would say it, but within us and between our community, we talk about that the men would not get it because the word that we would talk about is El Sancho, right? So it's like, they would not say, well, do you love your family? Oh, yes, of course, I love my family. But you're the sole breadwinner and your wife is at home taking care of the two kids. Oh, I understand that. I love my wife and my children to death. But why wouldn't you not want to get a life insurance policy in case something happens to you? Well, they could never give me a clear answer. And then one day, again, my dad tells me it's because no lo van a comprar por el Sancho. And I go, what the hell's that, Dad? And he goes, well, in Mexico, this is how it works. They don't want to buy because they think that if they die, their beautiful young wife is going to marry some guy and he's going to make out with all the money. So what I happened to talk to them, and I would bring that up and they would laugh. So I knew that I had them. They would giggle, right? And I would say, you don't want to buy because of El Sancho, right? And the wife would look at me and it's like, yeah, tell them to get life insurance. And I said, but there's a way to protect yourself from El Sancho. There's this thing called a trust. It's an estate plan. And I know that's very foreign to them, right? In my head, I said, okay, so how do I explain it? So we can do this thing where we can create, it's kind of like a company, but it's called a trust, where you can create it where the money goes into that trust and it's going to take care of your wife and your children, but half of it is going to always be in the name of your children. So if your wife were to marry the Sancho, he would not have access to that money. 99.9% of the time, they would end up getting the life insurance. Then we would have the conversation on that trust, because again, if people are listening to us and you have named minor children on your life insurance policy, wrong, because what happens if both of you die, you and your spouse die, they're not going to give an infant life insurance proceeds, so you have to get under a trust. So that's how I would go around that as well. So I would start educating them, and then I always have a whiteboard. Now I use my Mac TV and my big screen and whatever, but back then I would have a whiteboard and I would explain everything, how trusts work, how they would have to do a durable power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive. But again, in a language that my grandmother and my parents would understand, right? And so that's how I started, and it was just constant conversation, and then winning them over by honestly them really feeling that I had their best interest at heart.
So you started off by first the taxes, and then you started introducing them to the financial world. It sounds like with life insurance first, right?
Well, life insurance and savings, right? Because again, remember that I told you that back then almost 40 to 50% of Latinos were unbanked. That means people like your mom and dad and grandmother probably didn't have a bank account because we were used to dealing everything in cash. And, I remember that my dad, when he would get paid, he would take money to my grandmother. I don't remember how much it was, whether it was a $5 or $10 or $20 or $50. But my grandmother would take her money and put it in her bra. I remember that was her savings account. So one of the things I would talk to them about what a bank account was and how there were savings and having money underneath the mattress was very dangerous. And if somebody broke into their house, it would steal their money. So it was a lot of education, a lot of handholding, a lot of showing them things that are very common to you now were very foreign to them, right? It was a different world for them.
For the first 2 years, what was your success rate of convincing someone to get life insurance or to open up an account? Or
pretty much everybody. I mean, I honestly, because again, I would not focus on selling the life insurance poll. I would focus on educating them on the reasons why, right? If you've got a big enough why, you'll figure it out. I got everybody to save for their retirement. Everybody who had a retirement plan at work, like a 401k or whatever plan that they had available for them, a 403b if they were teachers. I got everybody to participate because I would show them the consequences of not savings, right? I don't need a crystal ball to know what your life is going to look like if you don't save. And so I would show them through spreadsheets or whatever, but I would guide them and show them the consequences of them not doing it. And also we would come up with a list of all the reasons why they should do it. And I think those reasons why were so important that it was just the natural consequence was for them to open up a savings account or open up a term insurance product or contribute to their retirement plan through work.
So for the first 2 years, were you struggling? Were you doing okay with your head above the water?
I've struggled for the first 20 years. What are you talking about? It's never easy because what happens, we continue to grow and continue to invest in the company. We would continue to grow and we would have to hire people who were not highly educated in the area of finance, but they were educated. We would get some young students coming in, and then they would find out that maybe that wasn't their gift and they didn't like it. They would leave us, and we'd have to constantly get new people in there. We've had, just like anything else, you've had good employees and you have bad employees, and bad employees who do bad things, and so. But it was a constant struggle because my fees couldn't be that high, right? I couldn't charge a lot. And I'll be quite honest with you, not making a lot of money, I think ended up causing a divorce in my in me. Talk about a commitment to the community, but it was a difficult thing. I didn't make a lot of money for a long time. And so it was just very fortunate that now I work with celebrities that pay us very well.
It was because of you I came across the term. I don't know how formal it is, but I like it. Financial therapy. So how did you come across financial therapy and use financial therapy with your own clients in the beginning?
Well, again, because, what happens is that there's a lot of dysfunction in our community, especially because we lack a lot of education. Now, I live in Irvine now, right? And so they're a highly educated community. But when you live in Boyle Heights and you have huge high school dropout rates, remember, I don't even know what it is now, but back then, Roosevelt High School, Garfield High School, we had over 51% dropout rates in those high schools. And that didn't include the kids who dropped out before high school. So and then everybody ended up going to like East L.A. College or Cal State L.A. And the ones that I think it was only like a 4% graduation rate. So there wasn't a lot of education in our community. And so it just made it very, very difficult to really focus. So the therapy was what I just spoke to you about. Let's instead of putting money in a mutual fund, let's put money into a family counselor. You have to understand, when I say put family in a family counselor, when people are not highly educated, most of the men would give me the most amount of resistance. Estás loco. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to go see a counselor or a therapist. I'm not crazy. I go, it's not about being crazy. It's about making your family unit stronger. And by making the family unit stronger, you build wealth. And so That's so the therapy was it was more of what I saw, what was needed. And so, there's actually a financial therapy association that I did a keynote a couple of years ago in Mexico. And they brought me in because most of the work that I've been doing over the years has been financial therapy, right? I think I've saved more marriage than marriage counselors when it comes to money.
So when was it in your business when you moved back to East L.A. where you started seeing, you know what, I can see myself here for a long time. I'm making profits. The momentum is going the right way I wanted to go. How many years after when you decided to go to East L.A.?
Brother, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I burned the bridge. I burned the boat, as they said, right? I went to the island and I burned the boat. When I left Newport Beach to go back to East L.A., it wasn't whether I was going to make it happen or make it work. It was going to work, and I was either going to die there or I was going to make it work. I never had a plan B. I've never had a plan B, to be quite honest with you. It took a long time to make some money. I mean, to become profitable. I think I made very little money. What happens, let me just share with you what happens. Most people think that if you deal with money, you must be making a lot of money, right? That's the illusion. Like, for example, if you meet most real estate agents are driving these really nice cars, and they're just probably one paycheck away from going bankrupt, right? In the financial planning industry, you're making your money from the clients and what you're charging them or not charging them. But my goal had gone beyond having a business that was about profit, more about it was a business having purpose. And I knew that I was changing people's lives. And I just felt this feeling, this deep feeling inside me that everything would always be okay. The interesting part is that there were times where I couldn't even make payroll, and I had to make payroll with my credit card, believe it or not. But I never gave up hope, and I've never not had food on the table, a roof over my head, money to pay for my kids' education or whatever that I needed. So to me, it wasn't, well, was I going to make it profitable? Was I going to make it purposeful? The profit would come, and the profit has come, to be quite honest with you. So that's where my mindset was at. If you always give a business a second way out, you'll always end up getting out. So that was my goal, and to this day I've achieved it.
So when you moved back to East LA to open the financial business, did you have any competition at all? Were you the only one literally in Boyle Heights doing what you were doing?
Oh, tons of competition. The competition was the guy across the street doing the taxes that was selling phone cards and the notary and everything else. I had competition from the Latino bankers across the street who were putting our clients into really bad products. Very high commission, really poor investment products. I had real estate agents in the Latino community. The financial planner tends to be the real estate agent because everybody and their mom is a real estate agent, and they love giving the worst tax advice ever, right, and estate planning advice. And so that my competition were other people in the community who were causing more harm than good, but most people were so used to it and felt that was natural. In fact, it took a long time for people to get me, to understand where I was coming from. I was the crazy one. I was the one telling people to save. I was the one telling people that, hey, maybe instead of spending $20,000 or $10,000 on a quinceañera, maybe you should only spend $5,000 on a quinceañera. I never got away from the culture because I knew the quinceañeras were important, right? All of my Anglo friends were saying, why are they having quinceañeras? The kids don't even go to college, yada, yada. I didn't buy into that. I know our culture and what's really important. And so I just would try to get people to spend less, and so that's how I did it.
So something you said earlier, I think you overcame the craziness or this look of craziness from you because you said you were giving speeches and seminars at the library, correct?
Right.
How did you even get people to go to those seminars at the library? Like, how did you get
So I'd get my clients. I mean, we're not talking about thousands of people. We're talking about maybe 20, 25 people.
That's still a big crowd.
And it was a big crowd back then. I was really proud of us. We would do flyers. We would call our clients and we would say, invite your uncle, whatever. We would do it sometimes in the evening. We would do it at lunch hour. I used to help a lot of nurses and doctors in the community. I would invite them. What else? We would just knock on doors and say, hey, we're going to have a free financial planning seminar on how to do things the right way, and do things right. So That's how we did it. And that's where, again, the content to the Latino Journey to Financial Greatness came from. Never did I know, right, that I would end up writing a book. But even the book, the way it got published was very synchronistic. It was just kind of how all weird things happened to get that book published.
So before talking about you becoming an author and writing those books, I still want to go back to the article that I think Jorge Ramos, you said?
George Ramos.
Is because of that article, is that what made you, I guess, nationally known?
Yeah. That article, that article really changed my life. Let me tell you why. I got calls from National Public Radio. I got calls from Univision. I started doing interviews on Despierta America National. There was a gentleman who read that article on the day that it came out in Boyle Heights. He was from San Diego. He was there visiting his mother and having lunch, and she had the newspaper in her house, and he read the article. Before he went back home to San Diego, he stopped by my office, and there was no address in that article, right? And he finds me, though, based on, he goes, across the street from Boca del Rio, so he finds me. And remember, there was no internet back then. So, and he comes to the office, and he runs up, and he goes, "Are you this guy, Luis Barajas, in the paper?" I go, "That's me." And he goes, "I'm going to come back in 3 months, and you are going to be my financial planner, because I used to, my mom lives here, and I need to support you." And I go, "Wow, I really appreciate that." He disappears, and about 3 to 4 months later, he reappears. All right, and him and his wife come in, and they want to hire me to be their financial planner. And he says, and the wife says, my boss wants to invite you to a conference that he has every year in Maui for 10 days. And he goes, "Oh, that's wonderful." And he goes, like, "But how much is that conference?" She goes, "Oh, it's $10,000. This is back in this is back in 92. 10,000. I go, I don't have $10,000 to go." He goes, No. My boss is inviting you. You just have to pay your flight, and if you want, I can have you share a room with somebody. You have to pay your flight and your hotel, but I can have you share the room with someone. And I said, "Great." I said, because my boss read the article that my husband read, and he loves it, and he wants to have lunch with you or dinner with you and get to know you. And I said, "That's great. Who's your boss?" And he goes, "A gentleman named Tony Robbins."
At the Anthony Robbins.
That Anthony, Tony Robbins, the motivator.
The motivator speaker. Whoa.
Yeah. I end up going, and I end up going for 10 days to Maui. I end up rooming with a guy named David Bach. David Bach is the author of The Latte Factor that's just out. A great friend of mine, a great supporter of my work. And I'm a great supporter of his work, by the way. He's wonderful. And when we met, he was this young guy who was just starting out. His dad was a financial planner in San Francisco, very, very successful. And David was writing his first book. And I said, "Oh, I'm writing a book. I'm thinking about writing a book." And I told him, and he was writing a book called Smart Women Finish Rich. So he wrote Smart Women Finish Rich, Smart Couples Finish Rich, Automatic Millionaire. He's been on all these big shows. And he goes, "Oh, you can need an agent if you sign a book." And he goes, "I'll recommend you to my agent." He recommended me to his agent, who represented back then some of the biggest people in the country. So I wouldn't have gone to that seminar if I wouldn't have made myself uncomfortable and roomed with David Bach. I don't think I ever would have published a book. And if that gentleman wouldn't have read that article from San Diego that day, I wouldn't have gone out there and then met all these very famous people that some of them became my clients. So it's just funny how life works, right? So that's kind of how I got to be nationally known. And from there, I started doing interviews on CNN's Your Money, National Public Radio, Despierta America. Done a lot of national work,
I'm just stumped that a guy just comes right up to your office, says, "I'll be back in a couple of months," and then
shows up.
His wife get to to a seminar. What was a conference with Tony Robbins?
It was Life Mastery. It was a conference in Maui called Life Mastery. It was 10 days. Deepak Chopra spoke. A whole bunch of people spoke. But I built like this lifelong relationship with David Bach, this incredible guy who I keep in touch with to this day. So that's a long time ago.
Man, that's crazy. So this article's. What exactly was said in this article that got you all this attention and all this fame?
The article was this kind of idealistic, pragmatic person who believed that he can change his community. And it was kind of like the prodigal son story, where the guy leaves and then he ends up coming back home. It was me leaving East L.A., coming back home and going out there and learning what I did to come back and bring it back to our community and do it in a way that was with as much transparency and honesty as possible. So it was all about that. And it was a vision of me one day having, if you go back and read the article, it was about me then at one day helping people more on a national level. Actually, what we're doing right now.
So then from that article, would you say that is that what advanced your career to become an author?
You know what advanced my career to become an author. Let me just tell you. So just so you know, from when I started to when I wrote my first book, which took me by the time it got published, because when you go to a major publisher, it takes about 1.5 years to get published. But I had quit Boyle Heights like 5 times. I mean, there was one time that it got so bad. I'm not kidding you. I walked out. I took my keys to the office. I swear to you, true story, and threw it in the dumpster. Now, remember I told you that I was above a seafood restaurant called Boca del Rio. Okay? I was so exhausted because I had people who were not following up, following through, not paying. I just felt the community didn't get it. I had just gone through divorce. Through the community, I didn't feel sometimes the love or the support. Sometimes I felt, we always talk about the whole crab syndrome. Sometimes within our own community, if you start doing a lot of television or whatever, they think that you're bigger than them and they try to bring you down. And I was having that bad day, and I literally threw the keys and I said, F it, I'm not coming back. I still lived in Orange County because my daughters were in Orange County. I drove back. I think it was about maybe 6 o'clock in the evening. I cried all the way home of the commitment that I'd given to the community and just not feeling the love. And I fell asleep like at 6:30, 6:45. And I woke up the next day like at 9. Literally must have been so exhausted, right? Slept 12, 13 hours, 14 hours. Came back the next day, didn't have the keys to my office, climbed into the dumpster. Remember what kind of trash is in the dumpsters?
The mariscos.
The mariscos, the stinky ass fish, right? And jumped in there, found the keys, opened the door, and a darle otra vez, and not give up on the community. And I had 2 or 3 of those really serious moments where I could come home and I was ready to lock the doors and give up. If it were not for the why, if it were not for the purpose-driven life that I have, I would have quit a long, long time ago. I'm telling you right now, no matter what business people start, if they don't have a big enough why, the business won't survive.
In those moments, you said there was two or three of those moments where you just had enough. You're for sure gonna quit. And what I know you say that you didn't want to quit on the barrio, the people there, the people of East L.A. But really, like, what made you just get up again and say, you know what, I'm gonna go back and open the doors? Like, what emotions or what thoughts did you have to pick yourself up?
Let me just tell you, it was always having my grandmother, my uncle, and my parents on my mind and saying, you don't give up on my parents. You don't give up on family. And I saw the community as my family. And it's just an extended version of it. And we all have family members that are just, mule-headed. They're just very stubborn. They don't want to learn. But you don't give up on them, right? And so I just felt that if I didn't give up, that good things would happen. And so that was just kind of driven and something that I had in my heart. But there were times where I'm telling you, I would drive like, say, 45 minutes to my house or an hour. And I can tell you one time where I literally cried like a baby home, and I was cursing our community out like you couldn't believe. I was just saying, like, F our community. They don't care. They don't want to get wealthy, yada, yada, yada. But I never gave up. And it would be that I would just get enough sleep and come back and just say, you know what? I've got to focus on the good things. I've got to focus on the positive things. There's been a lot of criticism because what happens is we live in a very cynical world. And when there's a good person trying to do good things, sometimes they don't believe you. And so, or they don't follow up with you. Or I had clients who would leave me. I was billing back then, God, I don't even remember, like $200 an hour. And now it'd probably be at $400 an hour. And I would charge, I think, $35 to do a tax return back there, $20 to do a tax return. And if I raised my rates $5, I would have clients that would leave me knowing that I had a UCLA degree, MBA. I'm one of the first Latino CFPs in the country, right? Certified financial planners in the country. And if I raised my rates $3 to $5, they would go across the street to the guy that was cutting your hair, doing your taxes, being your notary, and whatever. And that's the kind of stuff that would just say, well, hold on a second. They don't get it. They don't understand. I've had friends who are Harvard attorneys have opened up practices in Compton, who've had to close down because they didn't get the support from their community, right? But again, I felt that it was something that I just had to do. So again, it wasn't for them, it was something that I was doing for me.
Is there a point or a year where you actually have said to yourself, you know what, maybe they are just getting it? They are, that corner is turning. Latinos are getting a little bit more financially more wise.
You know, I there are, because of the sheer numbers, right? But the percentages aren't making a difference. The sheer numbers, there are a lot more people getting it, but if you take a look at the percentage of the people getting it compared to the overall Latino population, the demographic in the U.S., they're still not getting it. And the problem is that the financial planning industry spends so much money on marketing to take advantage, not just of our community, but basically most people, that most people aren't even aware or awake of what really could transform their life. And so, but we've had enough people, like, for example, over the years, I've had people who came from the barrio who are millionaires now. I mean, they literally have millions of dollars, not just invested with me, but they've bought real estate, they've started businesses. And so there are people who do listen and they change their lives. But, you know, you see people like you, young guys that are trying to get real good information. They're trying to cut through the BS, right? And so you do see a lot more of those. I think podcasts are something that are really valuable. I think a lot of people are listening to podcasts now. So there's a lot of different ways to get information. Also, the problem now, though, Nicholas, is that, remember back then, financial planners owned all the information. There was no internet. You'd have to go to a stockbroker to get information. Now you can log on and you know what Disney's selling for and go online. The problem now is there's too much information and you don't know. And that's what happened. You went down, like you said, the rabbit hole, right? Because there's just too much information that really confuses people. Now you have to find somebody who's going to sift that for you and then basically align it to really what you need versus, in general, what most people need.
I want to circle back. What really interests me about your career and about you is, you becoming an author. How did I think because of that article, did that article jumpstart you becoming an author and publishing books?
No, what jumpstarted my whole thing was watching George Lopez. I got an interesting story about George Lopez, and he probably won't listen to it because I heard him at the Ice House in Pasadena, and he went into like maybe a 2-minute rant on money and Latinos, and people were just crying, laughing. But if a white person would have said that they would have been racist, right?
Yeah.
So we're sitting there and we're cracking up, and my wife tells me, well, maybe you need to add some humor to what you're doing to break through those really difficult conversations about money. And so that's how I started doing this. So I started trying to be a little funny about money, and that's how I started. Somebody said you should write a book, and I told you I've loved books since I was a kid, and I always one day. Another true story. I was around 13 years old. I grew up in Boyle Heights, but I only saw English television, and I would see Merv Griffin, and I would see the Merv Griffin Show and Johnny Carson, and I remember telling my mom at the age of 13, one day I'm going to write a book. That's the age of 13. How would I know that, right? So I think that inspiration, but watching George Lopez, and then I thought I could do something and put together, and then doing the seminar, somebody said, again, wow, this could be turned into a book. And so that's what inspired me to write the book. And I'll be honest with you, Latino Journey Financial Greatness, there must be a couple 100,000 copies out there, because what I did is I figured out how to get into the hands of Latinos. Back then, I told you there were no bookstores. Latinos hardly didn't read. So I went after major corporations who were interested in helping the Latino community to sponsor me and buy the books, and I would then give the books away. And that's what we did. I think Bank of America at one point bought like 25,000 or 50,000 copies. We had McDonald's buy books. And so I would go and do speeches at major conferences with 1,000 Latinos. And we would give the books away at the booths where whoever was sponsoring me, and I would sign there for hours. And to this day, I have people who come and have me sign books that I met like 20 years ago. So, yeah.
How did you actually get the books to be published? Because I know nowadays you could circumvent all that. You could get your own books published by Amazon. You could do everything yourself. How did you get a publishing company to believe in you?
Okay, well, here's a great story. So the guy, David Bach, who I met at the Anthony Robbins out of just sheer chance, I guess, coincidence. As someone said, God's chance, definition of or the definition of of coincidence. It's God staying anonymous, right? But this gentleman already had an agent. Back then, you needed a book agent. And after that, he was flying to San Francisco where he lived, and his agent was going to meet him, or he was in Dallas, and his agent says, hey, I don't have much time to see you, but I'll stop by the airport so you can sign a contract for your second or third book or whatever. And that day that his agent went to the airport to meet him while he was changing planes to go to San Francisco, the Dallas newspaper did a story about me in their paper. And the lady arrives late, so he buys a newspaper, reads it, and he says, hey, this is my friend. After the agent says, this is my friend, he wrote a book too, maybe you can help him. So she grabs a newspaper, takes it with her on her flight, and reads it, and calls him in and says, give me his number. She calls me now. She's representing at the time. She's representing besides David Bach, but guess what? She's representing also Anthony Robbins. She's representing the guys that wrote the book Chicken Soup for the Souls. She's representing these major authors, and she ends up signing me, and she gets me contracts with HarperCollins, with all the major book publishers. And I ended up going with HarperCollins because they were going to do my book in English and Spanish. Some of them just wanted to do it in Spanish. Some of them just wanted to do it in English. So that's how I got the book published. It was just it was luck. Somebody reading my article at I think it was San Francisco Airport or Dallas Airport. Don't even remember now.
Man, you have a lot of cool turning points in your life, from the Rick Warren to getting invited to the Anthony Robbins thing in Maui, from David Bach and his book Manager, reading an article about you and she loving you. I mean, when you look at all these events that have just helped you move forward and help you gain momentum, what do you think about them?
Well, let me just share with you. I go back to, and I really hadn't thought about them, but I will tell you that the day that I met Rick Warren, the day that he changed my life, and a lot of these events happened after that. And I would tell you that God's in the details, and I actually feel like I've been led. Now, I told you that I was working in the barrios. Now you know that we are a very celebrated business management firm, and we cater to the Latin entertainment space, right? Even that story comes from the book. That's a very synchronistic event. I never said I'm going to be a financial planner or a business manager or wealth manager to famous celebrities ever. That happened because I had written my third book. I lived in Orange County. My next door neighbor says, hey. He shows up to my house, knocks on my door. He goes, are you an author? Did you write this book called Latino Journey? And that book had already been out for several years. And I said, yeah. You know that I work for Hyundai? I go, why? I know that. He goes, do you know what I do for Hyundai? I go, no. And that's a neighbor that I've known for years, right? And he says, well, I'm the global marketing guy for Hyundai. And we're doing a national commercial in Spanish. We just done it in English. And I think they had like Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman come out of the car and say, hey, that's a good value, buy the car. He goes, you speak Spanish? I go, yes. He goes, this is you on the book? He says, yeah. My staff said, there's this guy that we know, there's this lady named Julie Stav and Luis Barajas, the only two that I know nationally that speak on financial literacy. And he says, but you're my neighbor, you want to do it? And I go, how much do you pay? I think it paid like $5,000 at the time. I go, hell yeah, I'll do it. I ended up doing the commercial for Hyundai. The actress in that commercial was named Sandra Cruz, who's now like my sister from another mistress. I'm seriously, she's one of the loves of my life as well. And she ends up hiring me. Her husband, who worked for Sony, a couple years later, ends up becoming the president of Sony Latin. And they had a couple people who had been ripped off, and he recommended to a few of his clients. And from there, it was just like, if I wouldn't have done that, if I wouldn't have left, and if I wouldn't have done that article, and the gentleman wouldn't have read the Tony Robbins, and David Bach wouldn't have been there, I wouldn't have published a book. And if I wouldn't have published a book, I wouldn't have got the thing from Hyundai, and I wouldn't have met Sandra Cruz, and I wouldn't be right now listed as one of the top business managers in Variety magazine, Billboard magazine, working with some of the most iconic Latin stars right now, Latin music stars, and television and film stars. If it weren't for all that, I never chose it. I've always been led to it, and that's where we're at right now. Right now, we're trying to make as big or bigger change in the Latin entertainment space than even working in the barrio, because these people have higher, they're bigger targets than the poor people, because most of the people coming come from poverty and don't have that financial experience either.
So that is how you started to becoming a trusted financial advisor for like Latino celebrities, right? Because of that commercial on Hyundai, and Sandra Cruz, her husband, introduced you to.
Well, because they have a couple of people have been ripped off, and people, because again, remember, Latino celebrities are also come from poor backgrounds. They're immigrants or whatever, and so they were getting ripped off, and they needed somebody who honestly took care of them and would not just do their taxes or do this. I mean, we really comprehend. We pay their bills. We do their tour accounting. We do their accounting. We buy their homes, their boats, their cars. We do their estate plans, get their insurance taken care of, make sure they're properly protected, help them with their taxes. I mean, but and in the world of business management, there are a lot of business managers who rip off artists. And so for us, it's been very important to do the same level of work that I'm doing for our community. And we've never turned anybody down. The interesting thing, though, is that when I dealt with the poor, the rich people wouldn't come to me because, he works with the poor. And now that I work with the super wealthy, now the poor people don't come to me because we're too small. And I've never not turned anybody down. We have like 15 people here in our office that really help whoever wants to be helped. But I will tell you, Nicholas, I've learned one thing. Like, I don't know how much time we've already been in this podcast, but there's one thing that I've learned for sure after being in this industry for such a long time, is that you can't help people who don't want to be helped, who aren't ready to be helped, right? And again, I go into the community, and there's even artists who you can't help because they don't want to take the advice. You can't be a coach to people who are not coachable. And so that's my goal right now, is that how do I get people to become more coachable? And so they will take advice and seek the proper advice.
So it's like what you were saying. The rich people didn't want to come to you because you're helping the poor people. The poor people now don't want to come to you because they think, he doesn't have time for us. So how do you balance that? How do you still reach out to both communities and say, I am here to help both of you?
Well, first of all, we've never said no. We have a concept called Turn the Turtle at our firm. One of our core things, Turn the Turtle, meaning that there's people here who can't afford it. I mean, they're really hurting, but we never turn anybody down. And the visual is, if one of our staff members is walking down the street and they see a turtle that's upside down, you stop whatever you're doing, you go to the turtle and you pick it up and you turn it over so it can get going. We get sometimes phone calls, the pro bono work that we do, from people who basically just don't need a financial planner. They just need guidance. They just need they need some direction. They'll call, I'll take the phone call, my staff will take the phone call and say, what's going on, how can we help you? And then we'll guide them, right? But how do we do it and how do we balance it out? We balance it out by having young Latinos who wants to come into the community, who wants to help, who wants to be part of our firm, and also wants to help their community out, right? And so we balance it out by, again, never saying no and always being there for everybody who's in need of help. And again, we help. It's my whole concept is, if you give more, than you get, you'll always end up really satisfied and living a very meaningful life. And that's what we're doing, living a very meaningful life.
What's one aspect or detail about your career up until this day that just never ceases to amaze you?
One aspect that never ceases to amaze me? There's two emotions that will never change in humanity, and that's called fear and greed. And we have had people who love us, trust us, can't speak better of us than anybody else, and yet somehow at a party or with a tío, with an uncle, and talk to somebody who offers them something, like an offer they can't refuse, meaning that, hey, I just met this guy who's going to give me a 20% rate of return and guaranteed. I go, there's no such thing as guaranteed. Have you heard of a guy named Madoff who guaranteed everybody 10% every year, right? And with all that being said and done, they end up leaving us and going to these people who do this and eventually end up coming back with no money. We've had people who have lost $250,000. People who in the barrio we're talking about who saved all their money and have invested with people out of greed. The other thing is that there are people out there who will not invest because, again, the problem is having your money in a bank account is great for emergency reserves, but you really need to work your money, right? You really need to invest it to get it growing if you're going to do something with your life. Because most people are not aware of inflation, right? Inflation will eat up the money that you have in a bank account. You really have to work it. But because they've been conned or ripped off once, they'll never invest the rest of their lives. They're just so scared, the fear. And those things they don't cease to amaze me. It's like, I can't, somehow, emotions are so strong, you just can't overcome those. And I sit there sometimes just, I don't know, scratching my head and wondering, I go, what can I do? But sometimes you can't do anything. The emotions will beat out everything else.
It's 2019. Are more Latinos getting into the financial world as professionals? If so, why not? If not, why not?
Okay, so I am part of right now with the Certified Financial Planning Board on their committee on diversity and inclusion, because I think there's around 70-something thousand or maybe 80,000 certified financial planners, and less than 3% are African American and Latino, less than 3%, where we make up, I think, close to 30% of the demographics in the U.S. I find that less people are coming in. Also, I talk to people who are CPAs, people in also the industry, right, that are not just in financial planning, but accountants and whatever, and they're all telling me they're having a really difficult time finding young Latinos going into the profession of accounting or finance or money management. And again, because the industry is becoming very highly regulated, it's very tough to break into. A lot of people want to do the right thing now. People are understanding that there's a thing called fee only, where you don't sell any product or any commissions. So it's a lot harder to break into the industry because there's not a lot of us out there doing what we're doing. So I just can't be hiring every quarter one or two people. It takes time for me to build up a certain client base where I have a need so I can hire a client. I always want to give the first opportunity to somebody who's bilingual, and because a lot of our clients are bilingual and sometimes we speak Spanish to them. I didn't say Latino, I said bilingual, and it's the most difficult time trying to find somebody to hire, believe it or not. So it's becoming, I think, more difficult, and I think less people are going into the financial planning profession.
How can, let's say someone has been motivated by this podcast, they don't want to be victims of investment or the financial world. How can Latinos become more financially literate?
Well, I will share with you is, honestly, it comes down to reading. It really comes down to reading, and whether it's on Google or reading podcasts and learning the wisdom of what is the BS versus what's real, right? There are a lot of people out there. Look, let me just share with you right now. If you see someone talking about money and they're sitting in a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, or they're showing you a mansion, you're a sucker if you get conned into that. And, God bless you. And if they rip off your money or whatever, because I already know what's going to happen. I handle some really wealthy people, Nicholas. And let me just share with you, really wealthy people don't want you to know that they're really wealthy people. That's why I couldn't give you names of my clients. Really wealthy people don't want you to know. The people who are out there broadcasting about, make millions if you do my thing, or you sell this insurance or do that, are all basically at some point con artists or trying to rip off somebody else.
All those ads on YouTube.
Everything else, pretty much. So there are a lot of great people writing great stuff on financial planning. I'm writing my 6th book right now. David Bach's done some wonderful stuff. No nonsense, no BS stuff. There's a lot of great people out there. That's one thing. If they want to think about getting started, they can reach out to us. I've got my Facebook, my Instagram, whatever. I get emails. Sometimes people need guidance. I've guided them through the instant messages or whatever. We will help them here at the firm to get started. There's right now there's a lot of technology helping people to get started. We use a software. We use a investment platform called Betterment that is for people who want to get started with like $50. Right? You don't have to start. You don't need $100,000 or $200,000 to start. And so all this technology is really helping you out. If you need life insurance, you don't even have to go through an agent anymore. You can go online. You can go through Ladder Life, Haven Life, and basically you can go online and fill out an application. And guess what? No commissions. So the world is really transforming, and I'm really happy. So there are people who will never come and see me, and that's great, or see other people, and that's okay. But there are ways if they Google it, right? Like I remember when I was in my car and I was talking to my wife, and I had my granddaughter in the back, and I was asking my wife a question, and my granddaughter, who's I think 4 years old, and it was really funny, but I heard her say, Google it, and I go, what, mija? And she says, you were asking grandma a question. Just Google it, grandpa. Google it. And she's like 4 years old. So, I mean, everything's there. You know, if you need somebody to do it for you, we're here as well.
They could also read your books, right?
You know, if I wrote a book called The Latino Journey to Financial Greatness that they still use. I updated it about a few years back. Right now, I also have another book called My Street Money. There's Wall Street and there's Main Street. There's also My Street. My Street is the people like from the barrio and underserved markets. My Street Money is the anglicized version of The Latino Journey to Financial Greatness. But if you want to laugh and you want to read about your community and Latinos, The Latino Journey to Financial Greatness is the book. If you want to start a business, actually I wrote a business for women called Small Business Big Life for Women and Small Business Big Life, because the purpose of a business is to give you more life, right? For most people, they don't. And for Latinos, family is number one, and spending time with their family is number one. So on how to create processes, not how to start a business or do a business plan, but you've already started one. How do you get out of that rabbit hole once you've started that business to get some life back? So yeah.
I feel like for every culture, they are always going to have this. They're always going to have advantages in whatever field they want to go to. What's an advantage that culturally Latinos have that would make them successful in the financial world?
You know, it's the advantage that we have. I will share with you, and somehow it's a blessing and a curse, right? We're just hardworking people, man. You know, I travel the country. I've never seen a Latino begging for money. I've never seen one with a sign that says, give me money because I don't have a job. We are the hardest working people. We're very proud. We're very family oriented. We're very entrepreneurial, sometimes because we have to. And I think that sometimes we forget how much we have and how many blessings we have. And we just forget to put those resources and leverage those resources. I see, for example, in East L.A., where I see the parents and the grown-up children living in the house and the kids living in the house, the grandchildren living in the house, and I'll see 2 or 3 families living in one house. If you add up all the money that's being earned, let's say you have 4 families in one house or 3 families in one house, they're all earning like $60,000-$70,000 a year if they're just working for, I don't know, as a teacher or something. You add up all that money in one household, you'll have like $300,000 or $400,000 easily. And if they put that money together and lived and saved and invested, can you imagine how they would not change not only their community, but change their lives and their children's lives and their children's lives? We just have to get smart about it. So I think there's a lot of wonderful things. I mean, that's what I always look at. It's like, my dad is my biggest hero. My dad comes from, you know, Mexico with, doesn't graduate. I don't even know what grade he graduated from. And my dad's become a very successful man. And he did it through just hard work, getting up and never giving up. Did people rip off my dad? Absolutely. Did he have employees who stole from him? Absolutely. But my dad never gave up because of his work ethic. And Latinos have this incredible work ethic that you won't see with a lot of people. Now we just got to, instead of working hard, we got to work smart. We can teach them how to work smart. We can change at least the United States. That's for sure.
What's one financial or life advice that you hold dearly that you would like to share with the audience?
All right, so this is going to sound really stupid, but it's just literally save. Listen, we're already in the 11th year of the longest bull market in America, okay? Just by the whole concept of regression to the mean, meaning that we're going to go back to, at some point, we've averaged a recession every 5 years. We're in the 11th year of a bull market. The last couple of recessions we've had where the stock market was down almost 55%. The last one, real estate in certain places, was down almost 40%. The biggest buying opportunity, the biggest opportunity to create wealth is going to be coming very, very soon. I don't know when, because I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe 6 months from now, become a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, but it's coming. And if you don't have cash or money saved to take advantage of that opportunity, you're going to blow an incredible opportunity. But guess what? You didn't save for it. You're spending every dime. And people say, well, I don't have money to save. Listen, I'm going to call BS on everybody who tells me that they live paycheck to paycheck, they don't have any money, because I have worked in the barrio with husbands and wives who've only made $30,000 of household income with 2 kids, and they saved money. So it's a matter of priority. And I think the biggest opportunity is going to be coming really, really soon. And so right now is save as much money as you can. Put as much money away in the bank accounts. If you want to go and get more interest in the bank accounts, go to an online bank. You can go to like a website called magnifymoney.com, and it'll tell you all the online banks that are paying at least 2.5%. With no fees on savings accounts. And that's where I would open an account to start saving right now. So, recessions are scary for some people, but for people who are prepared for them, it's the most exciting time. People are losing their jobs and losing this and that. People who have saved and prepared for it are going to become wealthy again, and they're going to make a lot of money. So get ready for it. So start saving as much as you can.
One final question. What is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose really is to help create financial dignity and financial independence to people who don't have access to that, to provide them with the information and the education, and then to engage them into taking action. I once heard that, thinking determines what you want, action determines what you get. And somebody once said that knowledge is power, and knowledge is not power. Executed knowledge is power. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to change it from financial planning to financial doing. And so my purpose is to get people to take action and to move forward. It really will change people's lives when they really take action and they get the insurance policy and the savings account and the estate plan and they put money in their retirement plan. Their lives will be changed. And that, I don't need a crystal ball to know that.
Everyone, Luis Barajas, I want to thank you for coming into the show today. This is an episode where I'm going to have to listen to a couple of times just so I could really soak in all the knowledge and everything that you said. I'm sure the audience is going to listen to this multiple times too, so they could just really grasp everything that you said. I just want to repeat, he's the owner and founder of Lab Wealth and Business Management. What does Lab stand for?
Lab, so my name of the company has always been like Luis Barajas, Inc. And so my wife, Angie Barajas, is the backbone to this firm. In fact, the reason why I'm able to write books and travel and speak is because of her. And I wrote a book called Small Business, Big Life for Women, and Angie helped me with that book. And I think she had stepped out, and somebody wanted her to sign the book too, and they weren't willing to wait. So I signed the book, Luis Angie Barajas, and I put Lab. And I thought, oh my God, Lab, Luis Angie Barajas. And I changed the name of the company after that day to make sure that my wife was included in this business because she has been one of the reasons of my success.
Like I said, I wanted to find the best Latino financial expert out there, and I found them. So I just want to thank you for giving me your time today. How can people follow you? You have Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that good stuff.
Just go to Luis Barajas, Louis Barajas, Barajas.com. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Send me questions. Through there, you can email me through the website. So I'm always available.
I really thank you. Like I said, thank you again. I appreciate your time, and hope you have a good day today.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.